How's it going, guys? Welcome to my beginner's guide for Counter-Strike Go. I'm just going to be going over some of the basic fundamentals of Counter-Strike in this video. It's not really meant to be a guide for people who have grasped the basics of this game. So really just people who are starting out or lower ranks should be watching this video. So I believe there are three things that anybody who's starting to play Counter-Strike or wants to move up from the lower ranks needs to focus on before they can do that. And that's going to be your shooting mechanics, your movement mechanics, and your crosshair placement. So the first thing I'm going to focus on is the shooting mechanics in Counter-Strike. And the thing that makes Counter-Strike super unique is how the gunplay works in this game. So in most games, in first-person shooters, you can run and shoot and you'll be fully accurate. But in Counter-Strike, if you try and run and shoot, your bullets just go everywhere and it's a total mess. So in Counter-Strike, whenever you start shooting with rifles, you always want to be stationary. You really want to start practicing not shooting and moving. Another feature that I like about Counter-Strike is the spray patterns that each gun has. So each gun in Counter-Strike has its own unique spray pattern. So for the AK, the bullets will go straight up, to the right, to the left, and back to the right. Now even though the rifle will follow the same pattern of going up, right, left, right, there is some bullet deviation, so the bullets aren't going to be in the same exact spots every time. There might be a bullet, instead of landing right here, it'll land right here. So when you first start out in Counter-Strike, you probably don't want to be committing to too many big sprays, just because if you get past the first part, where it's just going straight up, it's kind of hard to counter the rest of the spray if you haven't practiced it. So when you're first starting out, I would definitely recommend just focusing on bursting. So as we just saw, the AK's first couple bullets will go straight up. So all you have to do for bursting with the AK is just pull down. I'd recommend practicing full sprays out of game, but in game I would only burst. Once you become more comfortable with sprays, your burst will naturally form into a spray. But definitely at the start, when you're playing at lower ranks, you should only be tapping and bursting. I would definitely recommend using a map like Recoil Master or just going into an empty server and shooting a wall a couple times just to get the idea of the spray patterns for each gun. So if I wanted to counter a full spray, just for an example, since it goes straight up, right, left, right, then I have to go down, left, right, left. So it'll look something like this. So this is the map Recoil Master. As you can see, there's a little ghost hair that they call it that moves down and around when you shoot. So when you're spraying, you want to try and keep your crosshair as close to that dot as possible. So the last thing I'm going to talk about is when you should be tapping versus when you should be bursting. This could be somewhat subjective because more people are comfortable with sprays over tapping and vice versa. Personally though, I think whenever you're facing headshot angles like in B site or heaven or at truck on A, you should always be tapping at these spots just because you have a lot higher of a chance of hitting your target if you're tapping. Whereas if you start to burst and you miss those shots, then you're an easy target because you're exposed for the other player. So this is just an example of me using tapping versus bursting. I see a guy headshot, so I just start tapping at his head, let this guy on sight. I notice he's fully exposed, so I commit to a spray. And then at truck, these shots I just saw the distance and decided to tap instead of spraying because I thought if I started to whiff my spray, I wouldn't be able to recover in time. So those are the basics to the shooting mechanics in Counter-Strike. Just a quick recap, when you shoot, you want to be stationary. When you first start out, you should be only tapping and bursting. And you should also be practicing sprays out of maps, just so that your burst will naturally turn into a spray. And remember to really focus on the angle you're peeking, just so that you can decide before you even peek it whether you're going to be tapping or spraying. So the next thing I'm going to be going over is just the basics of movement. So I'm really going to be focusing on is just strafing and counter-strafing. In Counter-Strike, strafing is really helpful for clearing angles quickly and getting info. and also shoulder peeking ops to try and bait out shots. So I've adjusted my crosshair so that it moves and shows an accuracy as I move. So as you can see, while I'm running, my shots will be really inaccurate, but if I stop moving after a strafe, you could see my crosshair takes a little time to fully reset. So if you want to counter this to be able to shoot quicker, you have to counter strafe. And a counter strafe is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. It's just going to be the opposite of the strafe that you're doing. So if I'm holding D here, I just have to hit A right when I let go of D. And as you can see, the crosshair will reset really quickly if you counter strafe. So this is something that you could just practice by changing your crosshair style to dynamic. You can type CL_crosshair style 3 in order to get a dynamic crosshair, or you can open the menu and somewhere in the settings you'll find dynamic. So like I said, if you want to counter strafe, it's got to be pretty instant. Right when you let go of one key, you got to tap the other. Like I said, I was just going to be going over the basics for new players or anyone who's stuck at silver. So I'm not going to be going over b-hopping or anything like that. So now the last thing I'll be talking about is crosshair placement. And I think that crosshair placement is really a key factor as to what rank you're going to be placed in, because you could be a lot more consistent if you just practice your crosshair placement. So there are 3 parts to crosshair placement that you should be focusing on. The first is keeping your crosshair at headshot level. The second is always looking at a possible angle that a CT could be. And the third is just pre-aiming certain angles when you start to entry sights. So the first part of crosshair placement is probably the easiest to master. All you have to do is just visualize a model in your head and just keep your crosshair at that height. If you're just starting out and you don't know what headshot level is, I would just use your teammates' heads as a calibration tool at the start of rounds and try and keep your crosshair around that. Now the only tricky thing about keeping your crosshair at headshot level is that there's a lot of different elevation in Counter-Strike maps. So as you can see here in A main, if a CT started to push here and I was holding A main, then even though my crosshair placement right here is headshot level for anyone who's on the same plane as me, if he peeks from A main, this would be headshot level instead. You just have to keep thinking about where your crosshair is and how the CT would be peeking you. So the second thing that I noticed about crosshair placement, especially at lower ranks, is that a lot of people don't exactly look directly where they want to be aiming right away. So I see a lot of people, they'll be running around and they'll be looking at the ground or just looking at boxes. And if you don't want to get caught off guard, it's really important that you keep your crosshair hugging different parts of the map. So when I say hugging, I just mean like sticking to the right side or left side of different objects. So when I come into A main, I wouldn't be looking into this box, I would just be holding to the right of the box. So the last thing I'm going to be talking about is pre-aiming. And pre-aiming isn't something that you could pick up right away, just like keeping your crosshair at headshot level and making sure you're not looking into walls or any obstacles. Because for those first 2 tips, all you have to do is ask yourself, hey, is my crosshair at head level and am I looking into a wall? But the third part, pre-aiming, just takes practice and time on maps. So when I'm talking about pre-aiming, it means when you peek angles, your crosshair is already on the spot that you're peeking, even if you're not looking at it right away. So it kind of looks like I'm contradicting myself when I say don't look into walls, but when you start to pre-aim angles on sites and stuff, you're definitely going to want to be giving yourself the best advantage you can, and that's going to be pre-aiming. So another thing to think about with pre-aiming isn't just can I clear different angles, but it's also thinking about where the CTs like to play. So the spots that I've noticed coming out of Squeaky that are really common for people to be playing are right here, 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 and here. So now that I was thinking about what angles are popular, now I'm just gonna clear them one by one. So I like clearing left to right on Squeaky just because I know that once I start clearing this side, a CT won't be able to just randomly pop out of nowhere. But if I clear right to left, since there's spawn and most of their map control is on that side of the site, if I clear here and start to move to the left, someone could peek me from highway or outside red, and I would be totally unprepared for that fight. So I like clearing left to right, and you just go one by one with your pre-aim. And like I said, it takes a little bit of time and practice to really visualize these angles, but it's definitely something that you want to start picking up early. So just a quick recap on crosshair placement. Always try and keep your crosshair placed at head level. Don't look into walls too often, and always just be very aware of where your crosshair is. And lastly is just to practice your pre-aim and think about the angles that CTs like to play. Alright guys, that's it for me. That's my beginner's guide to Counter-Strike Go. Like I said, it was just going over some of the very basic mechanics of Counter-Strike that anyone who wants to get serious with the game really needs to master before they can start using more advanced techniques. So thanks for watching, guys. I do plan on making some more videos, some more guides and different team play guides and stuff like that. So keep your eyes peeled, and thanks for watching.